We're really excited to see you here tonight, and I'm going to say a few things to get us started, and then mostly looking forward to hearing from our panelists and talking about what we're here to talk about tonight. Historic Denver, for those of you who aren't familiar, we're a nonprofit organization. We were founded in 1970, so we're almost 50. And we're really advocates and a resource for people who own historic properties, as well as for community members who are interested in preserving Denver's historic places and the stories of our local heritage. We launched the Regarding Denver forums a few years ago as an opportunity to really have conversations about the past, present, and future of our city's built environment, and to also really expand what we define as preservation and acknowledge that there are boundaries that we could push around how we honor and remember stories in our city. And tonight is a great addition to that. We host these forums every other month, and they're always free. So they're always the third Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. And in May, we'll jump to a totally different topic when we'll be talking about mid-century modern architecture, and who loves it, and who hates it, and why. I do want to start with a few thank yous. Most importantly, I want to thank Tony and Sue Teatro for being our host tonight. We couldn't do these events without community partners, and especially glad to be working with a fellow ICFD organization. And Sue Teatro, of course, was born out of the Chicano movement in this community, and it was started by students, so I think it's really appropriate that we're here tonight. And they've done, of course, many original productions, and I encourage you all to come, if you haven't already, to see the show about the West High Blowouts in 1960 and events of 1969, which is open now through the end of the month, March 31st. So plenty of time to come back and see the original work by the Sue Teatro team. I also want to thank Sober Communities for their support of this series, and the citizens of the SCFD, because we're a grateful recipient of that program. And we've also partnered tonight with APA Colorado, so if any of you are planners and need continuing ed credits, make sure you check in out front. These forums are free and open to the public because of donors and members of Historic Denver. So if you aren't already a member and you'd like to become involved and help us advocate for the places that make Denver Denver, you can check out our membership materials on the front table, and our staff members are out there and can help you. And we really think it's our whole community's responsibility to steward the places that we love. So I hope you'll get involved. And really then, to return our focus to tonight's topic, the anniversary of a transformational moment in Denver, a moment that took place at one of our cherished landmarks, of course, West High School, but added a new layer of significance to it. And this layered significance isn't unique to West High School alone. It's really true of the entire Lopez Lincoln Park neighborhood, which is rich with so many layers of cultural significance and heritage. We have a program called our Action Fund, where we work with neighborhood and community groups on projects that are meaningful to them. And so for the last 2 years, we've been working with residents in Lopez Lincoln Park to try to find the right way to honor and reflect those stories moving forward, recognizing that a lot of change and pressure is coming to our nearby, close Denver neighborhoods. So we've been talking about the original significance of the 1870s and the 1880s, but then also talking about the next layer of significance that really was catalyzed by what happened in 1969 and continued on through the 1970s and into the 1980s. These happenings at West High School and in the neighborhood at large had a profound impact on our city. And as we'll hear more tonight, this place, this neighborhood, this community is at the heart of a story that can be often obscured in Denver history, and that's the story of Chicano history. So we're hoping to adapt our existing tools that we have in Denver right now to come up with something new, a new way to honor, reflect, and protect the unique heritage in this community. So it may have elements of traditional preservation, but also some new flexibility and interpretation to ensure that everyone in Denver understands the importance of this particular place. We'll be hosting a community meeting in late April, the third week of April, to talk further about the work that's been going on for 2 years as we try to get closer to a finished product that we can move forward with as a community group. So I hope you'll come back out to that, whether you still live in the neighborhood or even if you don't live in the neighborhood but you care very much about what will happen to it. We hope you will come. We don't have the specific date yet, but we'll be putting that on our Facebook page, on our website, so look for it there, and we hope that you'll join us. And Shannon Schaefer, and I guess the manager of that project, so you can chat with her. She's also the manager of a brand new action fund we just announced a couple months ago, which focuses on preserving Chicano murals. researching where they are. Thank you to Emanuel and Lucha for their work on that. We're excited to work with them. So there's a lot of stories and threads coming together right now, and we're really looking forward to continuing this work and also learning so much, as we know we will tonight, from the speakers who are here with us. So I want to introduce them, and as I introduce them, feel free to come on up and take your seat, and then I'll get out of the way, and we'll hear from you. First, we're excited to have Emanuel Martinez here. Emanuel participated in the blowout in 1969, and he can share his experiences as a first-hand witness. But in addition to his activism, he's a noted muralist, and he has works throughout Denver, some of which will be part of our Chicano mural project, as well as work in the Smithsonian's National Museum of Art. And for those of you who don't know, although I suspect many do, one of his murals is not far away here at La Alma Lincoln Park itself. We also have Jay Alire here, and Jay was also a participant in the blowout in 1969. He grew up in the La Alma Lincoln Park neighborhood and understands its unique culture and value. So come on up here. And also Mia Martinez Lopez is here, and Mia is the assistant principal at the West Leadership Academy in the West High School building. She learned the story of Blackout from her father, Emanuel, but she also now works to ensure that the current students at West High School understand the legacy of activism that is part of the high school story. And her son, Esai, is here. He's a current student at West High School and can offer his perspective from a brand new generation learning these stories for the first time. Moderator this evening. We're so grateful for his partnership. He's been the artistic director of El Centro Su Teatro since 1989 and has been involved in the company since 1972. He has received numerous awards and accolades for his artistic vision and has worked on the production about the blowout that is showing right now. So again, I encourage you to come back to that. Thank you, Tony. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Give yourself a round of applause. So I didn't ask my crew to set up mics. This space has a really nice acoustics. We just have to remember to be loud, and it should be fine. Everybody can hear me okay? Yes. So I wanted to start just by talking about mentioning Tom Noel, right? Many of you know who he is, historian here in Denver. Tom, one of the most interesting things I think that of the many interesting things he says is that the original name of Denver was called Mexican Diggings. It was down by Ruby Hill, you guys. So in those days, they actually incorporated a year before they incorporated Denver in our area, right? So Mexicans have always been here, right? And it's been an ongoing conversation, and I think that where I'd like to begin our conversation is kind of giving you the lead up, right? The actual activity, the event, right? And then kind of like a retrospective of those. So before, during, and after of what took place that day 50 years ago. I'd like to preface it a little bit by talking a little bit about my perspective, my experience and my recollection of somebody who's been a lifelong resident of this city and West Sider, very proud West Sider. My family grew up in the Auraria neighborhood. We lived in the Auraria neighborhood before it was torn down in order to build a college there. But I remember Denver as an incredibly segregated city. And segregation all the way to the point of, I mean, there was an insulation in being in these neighborhoods because we were safe amongst ourselves. There was a, you know, we could speak Spanish and not feel that there was something wrong with that, and we could speak English and that could be okay too. But there was also a danger we felt in going outside the neighborhood. So there was also a restriction. Well, it offered insulation, it also offered restriction. And just a quick little story, and then I will move on. That I remember being a kid and finding myself going down Broadway too far south. And I was actually a little bit south of Alameda and Broadway. And a car pulled up with these kids. They were white. or whitish. I can't tell exactly what, without, you can't make assumptions. But they were in a pickup. I'm not making that part up. So white kids in a pickup, I'm not creating stereotypes necessarily. And they yelled at me, right? And they said, hey, Mexican. And then one said, why don't you go back to where you came from? And then another one said, why don't you go back to Mexico? And that stopped me, because I had never been to Mexico. And my parents had never been to Mexico. And my grandparents had never been to Mexico. So for me, it was like I had no other experience than being part of the United States. They also called me a beaner, which I also had to think about too, because I really like beans. So I struggled, because it was like, I don't know if I feel bad about being called that, But I did stop, and I think that kind of gives us, anyway, the part about the go back to Mexico offers us just a somewhat of a preamble, right, of the world that we lived in, where we were not necessarily American enough, and clearly we were not Mexican enough. And I think one of the byproducts, Juan Espinosa, who has the photo out there in the lobby, the photographer, said that Chicanos had to go to college to learn how to be Mexican and to reclaim all that history, because it had been gone from us, So that's kind of the world that just as a beginning preface. So with that, let me ask either, we didn't draw straws, but it seemed like it would go. Let me start with Jay, because I know you're going to give me a lot on the day stuff. Just kind of like your lead-up stuff. Oh wait, I'm sorry. And one more thing, I'd like to recognize Jeannie Perez, who's in the audience here. Jeannie was the catalyst behind so much of this. This woman is a hero. We don't even know it yet, but we're going to know it by the time we're done with this stuff. So, thank you, and we will definitely look forward to hearing from you as well. Okay? So Jay, take it away.
So good evening. In 1964, my mother was chosen to go to Tucson, Arizona, to testify in front of the Senate Subcommittee on the War on Poverty. And at the time, I was probably about 10 or 11 years old, but we didn't really realize the significance of that until the community started getting more money into the neighborhoods. And so with the influx of money, we saw more people going to school. People were going to night school at Emily Griffith. They were developing community-based organizations like the West Side Action Center. The other institutions that were here during that time were like the SPN, DTU, the Sociedad Protectiva Mexicana de los Trabajadores Unidos, which was a social organization. The visiting nurse service had a little clinic on 12th Mariposa, right across the street from the Auraria Community Center. And all of those things going on collectively, they would bring us together as young people. We had our health there, we had a little bit of recreation. Of course, we had the pals, the football. Yeah, the police athletes. We had football in the parks, and baseball up at Crow Hill. I mean, so there was a number of different things. But what happened is we were all basically in the same boat. The only disagreement I have with Tony is that our projects were integrated. We had whites, we had blacks, we had Indians, we had Asians, Filipinos, but what our commonality was, we were all poor. And the other commonality is that we didn't have any dads. We were all single mothers raising children. So in that frame of mind, the only way we could get out of where we were at was education. And the lead up to West High School was what was on the news. The number one story of the day was Vietnam. So 1964, 1965, everybody's got to know about going into the service and becoming a G.I. Joe or a Navy Frog or whatever. But by 1968, 69, the reality is hitting us. We're 17 years old. Next year, we're eligible to go to the draft. I don't want to go. What are our alternatives? College. We can't afford college. So what West High School did is it sort of blew open the door that allowed opportunities for us to be able to go to college that weren't there the year before. Also, 1969 marks the anniversary of the formation of United Mexican American Students, which was a group of college-age students who advocated for more education, more classes, more faculty, more staff, more students on college campuses. So after 1969, we saw more and more people going to college. The number one career that most of the people going into is either going to be social work, oriented, or the law. We had a lot of lawyers. And so those lawyers came out, they started advocating more, bringing suits against school districts on their hiring practices. We also had the U.S. government allow us a little bit of affirmative action. So they opened up the door for some preferential treatment for 3 or 4 years, and then they slammed the door. We want everybody to be equal. After 500 years, now you want to be equal, huh? But that's sort of the lead off. And going back to the Rare campus, there was a campaign, the Denver Urban Renewal had a bond passage. It was the same ballot issue that the Olympics were on. So those of us who were young were voting against both the Olympics and the passage of the Rare Higher Education Complex, because we didn't want them to come in. After that passed, the whole neighborhood changed. So I'm going to leave it right there and let somebody else talk.
So, if you could talk maybe about, I mean, you have an incredible history in social activism prior to this time. Perhaps some of the issues that were leading up to the frustration that you guys felt going into the school at that time. You. Sorry.
Okay. Well, yeah, I go pretty far back with the movement, like 1965. When I was I was still in high school, and I was a part of the Los Voluntarios organization that was started by Gorky Gonzalez, and later we started the Crusade for Justice in 1966 in April. And I was one of the incorporators of that organization at the time, and I was just graduating and going to college. But that same year, in 1966, had the opportunity to go work for Cesar Chavez. We spent a little more than 3 months there, and later went back to do an altar for him, which is now in the Smithsonian. But that altar, while I was there, I actually took part in that walkout in Los Angeles, which was actually approximately a year before the West High walkout. So West High wasn't the first walkout, but which I took part of. And at that time, my first wife was actually, we were in the demonstration, the protest. She got hit by a building club knocked out with the teeth. But so I had already taken part in protests with Chavez and with that walkout in Los Angeles. But so I already had some experience in what to expect at the '69 walkout at West, and I anticipated that there was going to be problems, and we talked about it at the Crusade. We knew, once the police were there, unlike their version of the story, they're usually the ones that initiate the violence, and they did. We were trying to be peaceful, and they're usually the ones that provoke it and start it, and that's what happened in the case of West High School. And at that time, I was living I was living at the Crusade for Justice building on Downey Street, but I moved to the West Side housing projects, the Yellow Jets. That's where I knew Jay when he was, younger kid.
Yeah.
But you saw Jordan. When I was involved in the West Side here, I was the Lincoln Park Tenant Council president, and I was on the West Side Action Council. And I initiated, when we took over Lincoln Park, by we, I'm talking about the staff there. Before we moved into the projects, a few of us left the Crusade and moved into West Denver in the projects in Lincoln Park. And our whole intention was to first take over the park, which we did. We were successful at that. It was all white staff there, and I had become a lifeguard in order to paint a mural. So I started off as a lifeguard there. But later, when the winter came, they allowed me to use a little building there to implement an arts and crafts training program that I got a small grant from DO, Denver Opportunity. And with that money, once that was out, I asked Parks and Recreation if we could use it, that little building, continue to use it year-round as a rec center. And that's the birth of the La Alma Recreation Center. That was the first rec center there. And this was just a little storage garage for their trucks. So that was the beginning of that, the La Alma Rec Center. I became the first director there, and later, as you know, they built a very beautiful center there, and I went, after leaving and living in New Mexico for 5 years, I came back and did the mural in 1978 over there. But the West High Walk, my involvement there was, I was part of the Crusade. We were supporting the youth who asked for our support, and we had meetings at the Crusade. Jeannie was part of that. I heard, and two of my best friends, Gilbert Quintana and Kelly Votto, they were two of the guys that moved to the West Side in the projects, and we became part of the staff of the Lincoln Park pool. But then we all, Jeannie and them, tried to negotiate with like Schaefer, the racist teacher that was provoking a lot of this, and I think she even went in his class before. But at that time, we were sympathetic with that protest, like we were with Kiriyama and with Cesar Chavez and his boycott. So we, as an organization, a civil rights organization, we supported different protests. So we were there. That's all we were there for. We weren't there, and we were also there to protect the students, because we have experience in dealing with the police. Because the police would definitely provoke. They did that in Lincoln Park at least twice. They had a worse riot in West Denver than West High was when we tried to change the name of the park. So anyway, the point is that we were there to mainly protect the people, not to start any violence. And I was arrested along with approximately 25 other people. My experience personally was when I was in the paddy wagon with Cartier and Ernesto Vigil and a few others, and we were all in the paddy wagon, men, and they had this 15-year-old girl who was a fighter. She was fighting wildly with the police, and it took about 5 police to get her in the paddy wagon, and she had her foot stuck in the door of the paddy wagon, and we had to, in handcuffs, we were all pushing on that door, and the police were pushing on her leg, and we finally got her in. But you know, they were violating law. Shouldn't be putting a 15-year-old with, you know, a bunch of us men in the same paddy wagon. But anyway, what they did is put tear gas, and there's a small ball on top of the paddy wagon where they just went and just sprayed tear gas in there. And it was just so cloudy in that little paddy wagon that we were just like totally, yeah, you couldn't see, your face is stinging. And that was the longest trip from West High to the jail. It was terrible for us. I mean, we had to endure that pepper spray or whatever they put in there. But anyway, so we were there. We fortunately were let out because the students, along with a lot of other people that supported the West High walkout, including Black Panthers, some of the student groups, I think it was STS or one of those. But we had other support. It wasn't just, and it wasn't just a Chicano thing. We had Black people supporting the walkout, and white supporters sympathetic with the students and understood their demands. And so it wasn't just a totally Chicano thing. I just want to clarify that. And they marched and were able to have the police release us all. And we all went to court. We were all charged with assaulting police, every one of us, which was totally, a lie. And it was the courts, in the courtrooms. It was these television stations that saved us because they documented all this, and they showed exactly what happened in all of our cases. So we were all acquitted. But that gives you an idea of what it was like at that time with the police department. And we had yellow journalism in the newspapers about things, like it was all our fault, and they sympathized with the police. So anyway, I just said I don't want to take too much of your time, but that was my involvement. I could get into some other things later. I brought a couple of things to share with you tonight. One is this collage I did for the Smithsonian, which is part of a national art exhibit called In the Spirit of Martin that they put on, and it just depicts what was going on in 1969 and 68. The Poor People's Campaign was one of the other events that I had taken part in Washington, D.C. But anyway, feel free to check that out. And also, as an artist, we're talking about doing a memorial, a permanent memorial that will be placed hopefully in the front of West High School, and will memorialize the event, and it will be there permanently. So with that.
So some of the issues were, and I want to talk about Schaefer a little bit, but so I see some people here look like they're about my age, or might be around my time period and stuff. And you know what 68 was like. 1968 was Bobby Kennedy was killed. Martin Luther King was killed. Bobby Kennedy's death was a huge thing for the Chicanos because Bobby Kennedy was sympathetic to the United Farm Workers Movement. And then the Poor People's March, and then you had the Chicago Convention. All of these things happened, but there's also the piece of the students being massacred in the plaza at Tlatelolco in the pre-Olympic, and those things affected us as well. So we're getting ready. Nixon's reelected, and we're getting ready to go into the Tet Offensive, and the rates, the death rates for Latinos was 20%, while they represented 12% of the population, which meant they were dying at higher rates. Consequently, that meant that they were being placed in harm's way much more. So a lot of students were getting pushed towards the recruiters who were hanging out in the schools. waiting there. Any of the kids got popped for doing anything, they'd say, you know, you can go to jail for stealing a car, or you can go out to the military. So they really was feeling they were being pushed to their to that space, right? There had been a history with the Denver Police Department. In the play, we talk about Luis Pineda, and for somebody who's growing up in here, Luis Pineda was a young man, 15 years old, who was killed by the police at O'Mara Forge, which was on Mariposa and Colfax. And Louis was killed. He was shot twice in the back after he had been told that he stabbed the cop. People know all that later. Nobody knew that then because the police didn't even feel that they had to account for it at the time. The other thing, so you have issues of inferior education that they felt, dead ends. People felt they was to go to jail or to the military, right? Essentially, what we heard in the story circles was we just felt that we got no respect. The police felt that they could do anything they wanted to without any repercussions. Another thing that was kind of interesting that we found out in our research, and it talks about in the Westward article, if any of you picked that up, was that there's a lot of interesting quotes from George Seaton, who was the police chief, who was very much a law and order. That was the key phrase here, but law and order actually meant white supremacy. You know, it meant that the order there was that whites had the privilege and had the place, right? And order meant preserving that position in that place. It was a really interesting, I mean, looking back at it 50 years later, you can look at it and you can say, you can put that perspective. This is what they were asking for. So Seaton's already, there's interviews with him where he's already talking about war in the streets. He's talking about we need to be prepped for this thing, and we're never going to let this become Detroit. 1967, the Detroit riots that took place there, right? So he's already prepping for this stuff. They finish a training in anti-riot, crowd control, anti-riot training days before this breaks out. Somebody asked me, so you think they expected something? And I said, no, I think they got new toys and they saw these kids as the opportunity to test them out. Excuse me. So there were a lot, I mean, it wasn't just a blanket, this is racism. Kids were feeling that they really didn't have a change. And then the last piece, I think, is the positive identity philosophy that was being advocated and being taught, right? Positive cultural identity that Emanuel and the artists that were bringing into the picture, and the things that the crusade was teaching about. One of the things that happens after this, right after the blowouts, is several days later there's the National Chicano Liberation Youth Conference that takes place. And at that conference, people come, they expect 300 people and they get 1,500 people from around the country. And the expectation was that that it was going to be small, and it turned out to be huge. They got people from the Young Lord's Party from New York, they got people from Canada. So all these people come into Denver, and you have to imagine after you just went through this incredible traumatic experience, and then people walk into the space with you, and what kind of energy was taking place. One of the most important concepts that comes out of the youth conference is this concept of Aslan, the concept of this idea that this land was indigenous land, right, and that the Southwest, the 5+3 states that were once part of Mexico, right, was this mythical Aslan. Aslan means the land to the north in the Mexica, culture. But it gets translated to mean these were the states. So the one piece is it establishes a desire for our homeland. The way it works in terms of combating the perceptions that we're having, when they tell me go back to where you come from, what do we say? We are where we came from. We are here, right? We didn't go anywhere. So it creates a really powerful ideological challenge to that. The other piece is one of the tenets of white supremacy is racial purity. Well, the thing that came out of the conference was this idea that we're mestizo people. Emanuel has this incredible graphic here that has the Spaniard on one side and the Indio on the other side, and in the middle there's the Chicano. So he creates this ideological counter that says, you know what? You're right. Racial purity doesn't mean anything because you're right. We are not racially pure. We are mixed. with everything there is, and we think that's a damn good thing, right? So those are two powerful ideological pieces that come out of this conference that influence us going forward. One more, and then I'd like to ask Jeannie to talk a little bit, is the other piece of that is people ask me what was that contribution out of the Chicano movement at that time period. I was reading last year. Carlos Fresquez got this award for the Bonfi Stanton Foundation for all the wonderful work he's done over the years. And the Bonfi Stanton was excited, and there's a lot of this idea of Denver as a mural town. We see murals all over the place. You know where the first mural came from? This guy here. Those first murals were where our identity was placed, our stories were placed, our dreams, our desires were all on this wall, proclaiming to the rest of the world that we're not invisible, that we are here. So when I see, I don't care if it's Nike putting up a mural, I'm going, you should thank Emanuel Martinez for that, right? Denver, so you want to see Denver's influence? It's all over this city. Because they just discovered it was one way to keep away graffiti. We discovered it was a way of expressing your identity and who you are. So that's my spiel.
One of the oldest murals is located right across the street in the library here at Byers Library. It was done by Corota Espinosa. And it's been there since the 70s. So if you want to go, there's a little map in there also that tells you each piece that she put in there. And she's still around, and she has a number of murals around the city also.
Who's that, Hito?
Corota Espinosa.
Oh, yeah.
So I would like to ask, Jeannie was one of the leaders of the walkout. So it's really great. We've been looking all over for you. I'm so glad to see you. If you want to come up here, you can, but if you feel more comfortable
No, I
presenting
feel better here.
I had a feeling.
And I have a loud voice.
So if you could, what I would like to know, if it's okay, and then we can open it up. I want to bring you, the other two people into the conversation too, but what I would really like to get some kind of idea of the right before that, what led to that moment for you guys to do this thing. Take me there.
Okay, thank you. Well, I started with the Crusade for Justice since I was 15 years old. I'm 67 now. And that was like, prior to that, you know, I always thought as a Chicana, you know, I didn't even know the word Chicana when I first started or anything like that. I didn't have no identity or no self-pride or even self-worth at that time. You know, before the Crusade came along, the Chicano movement and all that stuff, we were just like, as young people, I was brought up in the West Side, down here on 1st and Inca and on 13th and Calumet. I went to the West Side elementary schools, and then we moved to Southwest Denver, up there a little ways from Westwood. Well, we were like the first 5 Chicano families in that primarily white neighborhood. I wasn't even allowed to ride the city buses, the school buses, because the gringos would tell me that Mexicans weren't allowed on their buses. I used to have to pay for the buses or walk 3 miles to go to Lincoln or 1.5 miles to go to Kebner, me and my sisters and brothers. I'm the oldest of 6. And they wouldn't let us because we were Mexicans. We'd go step out there waiting in the cold days to catch a city bus to go to Lincoln. They'd come by, splash mud and dirt on us. We had to go home and be late. That's how the racism was. There was so much prejudice, so much racism. Not only here in Colorado, but this is where I was raised, here on the West Side of Westwood, pretty much, and stuff like that. That we just thought of ourselves as scared people in a way. I know I was scared when I was young and going to school, you know. You can't tell this teacher nothing or the principal because they'll call your mama, you'll get your butt kicked, you know, and because they say they're right. And what if they were teaching you something wrong? I used to tell them, that ain't right. So when I went to West and stuff like that, this teacher, this racist pig, I call him now, and I feel I have the right to because of what he put me through when I was 17 years old. Every day he mocked my name. Fine, some gringos can't say our name, Perez or whatever, Martinez or lo que sea. They say, I'm sorry, I can't say it. That's fine, you know? I can't say your name sometimes too. But no, this cabron every day just to mock me and to make fun so that every kid in the classroom would laugh at me. That's humiliating, you know? And then one day, he's our social studies teacher, right? And I used to love history and social studies. He comes off the wall telling us about our people, about my mama and my grandpa, that they're stupid. We're stupid because that's why we don't go to higher education, because we're stupid people. Our parents were stupid. Their parents were stupid. Our abuelitos and abuelitas who know 2 languages, who were self-taught, how could they tell me that that person is stupid? You know, so I get up right away. No, you can't say that. And you know what he said afterwards to the officials when Ernie and Gilbert Quintana and Ernie went down there as my brothers to kind of tell him, hey, he's up on her, man, you know? You don't have to be making fun of her every day and stuff. They went as my brothers from the crusade, because at that time I was a beret, and I had already had 2 years of learning from Corky, my self-pride, my culture, my history, you know, and that I wasn't a piece of shit, and I wasn't stupid like the schools were telling me, wanting to put me in special aid because I had a little learning disability with dyslexia and stuff that they found out later, you know. But in the meantime, they categorize us all in the special ed. Oh, they can't speak English. They can't. In Kevner, they'd smack our hands with rulers. An Italian teacher, but nosotros, we were young. We were 14, you know, 15. We didn't know. Me and my girlfriend were speaking Spanish about the Italian teacher that we had. Oh, esta cabrona, bruja, esto, lo otro. You know, we were all mad. We were young kids, being kids, you know. And we didn't know that Italian was a lot like Spanish, but she understood it. We got our hands smacked and we got in the principal's office thrown out for 3 days, you know, for speaking our language. But, you know, things were rough back then. And by the time I had the 2 years of teaching at the crusade, that brought me up to be a strong person and not a timid little child like I was always as a younger person, I started saying, no, ya basta, like the huelga used to say. That's enough. You know, somebody has to start talking up for our people, like Corky was, a lot of the leadership then. We have to talk up even as young as I am and say this is not a right, especially in the education system, because all of our children were not stupid and they were treating us like we were in the education system. We weren't even allowed to get some of the advanced classes that a lot of them qualified for and that were smart enough to do, because the white people at that time were oppressing us. The government was keeping us down. And, well, when I went to the walkout, I started like with that. But you know what made me cry the other night when I see the performance? We as young students, and me personally, weren't expecting the violence. We did not go out there wanting to fight or acting like badass West Siders or nothing like that. We wanted difference, justice. We wanted something different in our education. We wanted to be respected, and we wanted it not for ourselves maybe necessarily, but the future generations, so that things could change. I was always wanting change for the better, not personal, celebrity fame or nothing. It was just for the masses of my own raza, because I believe like Corky. Over there in Westwood, when I was over there, they even called me Little Corky, because I'd always be passing out flyers for the kids to get out of, obviously, we had a lot of drugs in our neighborhood. And like back then too, a lot of drugs. And SWAT was one of the first, that SWAT team that came out back in the 60s. That's the first neighborhood they put it into, was Westwood. And that's where they started harassing a lot of the kids down there in Westwood and stuff like that, because there was a lot of them really strung out on drugs and stuff. And I just wanted to kind of pretty much stop a lot of the chotas and the kids, not knowing that there was a lot of contributions that Chicanos had given to this country, especially here in Colorado, man. All of Colorado has been developed, but mostly by raza. It's been built by raza. It still is being built by Raza. All the construction workers out there, who are they? Chicanada, man, you know, we're still, I mean, sure, there's a few that are up there in politics and a few teachers. Granted, that's wonderful and that's great. There's a few more grants available for the Chicanada, but still, there's a lot of masses of our people that are still being exploited to this day, that we should get together again and start saying ya basta and teaching our younger little ones you know, that we should not have to put up with that. We shouldn't. I teach all my younger generation nieces and nephews, oh, Auntie, you're crazy. I know, Hita. This society made me crazy. Living in it long enough.
That's a great segue. I don't mean to catch you, because that'll be time for us to keep
That's
going.
okay, go ahead.
But you give us a good segue into, because one of the things I read because we've been fortunate that people are starting to cover this a little bit. We had some good stuff, but there was a conversation about people saying, well, the movement's dead. The movement went from, and I teach this stuff at Metro, so one of the things we talk about the arc being from 65 to 75. And personally, I don't agree. But maybe I can turn that over to you. Is that movement dead? Is there a legacy that exists in the role that you have right now?
So my name is Emanuel Martinez Lopez. Just as a disclaimer, I'm Emanuel Martinez's daughter. Just kidding. And I do claim them all this time. I also want to make a correction that there are 2 schools at West High School now. And when I was introduced, I was introduced as assistant principal of West Leadership Academy. That is another school that is on the campus, and actually the principal is here, Ms. Teresa Calapa is over there. So she's West Leadership Academy, and I'm part of West Early College. And so I'm the principal resident there. What makes this a very interesting year, not just this year, but Teresa and I have worked together for about 7 years or so, 6 or 7 years. I came to West in 2009, which was the 40th anniversary of the West High Blowouts as a dean, and my first office was right facing the window where I grew up seeing a picture of my dad standing up on top of the partial wall there as the blowouts were all coming out, or as the walkout was coming. So for me, it was very impactful right away. And so I've been there now 10 years, and Teresa has been with us during that time. Coincidentally, my dad was an activist and an organizer there. Teresa's father, Mr. Senna, was a teacher there. And so Mr. Senna was listed in the demands of the West High students to be appointed as one of their counselors because they found him to be one of their advocates. And so here we are 50 years later, we work side by side all the time. And we're one of, actually there's 5 Latino administrators in the West High School building right now. 3 of us are in principal roles. 3 Latinas are in principal roles. And so for me, this is very impactful because I grew up learning about the movement, obviously, because of my dad and the family that I had around me. And it was very clear to me that it was important to go to college and to think about those demands of having Chicano teachers and administrators and access to curriculum. And I've been fortunate because I got to be part of all of those things. I was a Chicano teacher and now an administrator. And now we see the results of that movement really coming to life on that campus. So yes, there was a little story earlier this year about probably kids at West don't even know what happened. And I got calls immediately from my teachers, and they said, "Did you hear what they just said?" And the reason why is because when I started there, I was a history major, went to Metro, and a Chicano studies major. And so I teach, a history of West class seminar for every incoming class that comes in. And so we always definitely showcase, it's the history of West, so it goes back, to 1883, but we also look at a very close, examination of what the West High Blowouts were. And then we say, okay, fast forward 40, 50 years, where are we now? So it was exciting to me that my teachers, many of them, not Chicanos, not from Denver, but knew right away, no, this is not true, and our kids do know. And because we've done the work to really teach them about not just the history of who they are, but where they are from. Right now, like I mentioned, West High School has 2 schools on its campus. The demands that were listed were access to be able to speak our languages. West Leadership Academy is a dual language school. The first of its kind to be 6 through 12 in this side of Denver. And West Early College that's my school, also 6-12. So we have incorporated in all of our little ones, so 10 years old to 20 years old, essentially in our school building at times. But West Early College is another, addressing one of those demands is, access to higher education and curriculum. As an early college, all of our students take college classes as early as 10th grade, and they graduate with associate's degrees before they get their high school diploma. And so that's free to them. And so we feel is very impactful for our undocumented kids and our kids who have not had that access before. That's our mission. So we do that through classes just like every other college class would have, your English 121, your math 121, but we also have Chicano studies in our classes, in our school as well. So, we really feel like, yes, the movement is still alive. We have, because, this is 2019 now and hashtags are a thing. So last year, our school made a lot of really significant growth. And kind of aside from what, the Chicano movement, or even thinking about what the connection would be, I had staff and then students who decided to call their movement through school, their growth, hashtag movement. And so it was just kind of coincidental, and it was like, this is what you're going to call it? Okay, cool. But they weren't making that connection, maybe at least consciously. They had to make it their own for sure. So we have we've been calling the movement on that campus, and exciting to see. Our kids are growing fast. They are learning in both languages. They have in college classes on our campus, and 5 blocks away at Metro, CCD, UCD, and Emily Griffith. They're going to any of those institutions, whatever fits what they need. Because some of those kids want that 4-year degree, some need that 2-year certificate. It really just depends. So we've done a lot of work on the West Campus to meet those 10 or so demands, because we really do feel like it's very important. I have brought, again, another disclaimer, I brought my son, he's down with the table there. He's also a student at West Early College, and I brought him because, well, he's my kid, he has to come with me, but also it's pretty fun to be at this table with my dad and my son. He's a student. He's also been a part of Alfredo de la Lucha, or the Tierra Maria Youth Brigades, as they used to be called. Are they still called it? Kind of half and half. And so he's been doing that since you were, what, 12 or something? 13, yeah. So he learns in school, and he learns out of school. So the movement hasn't died.
What you got?
I don't know. Danny's been a part of it too since how long were you? 17. But Danny teaches
Only
it.
19.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
That's someone's good colleague.
Well, I guess I'll just talk about Tierra Maria. It's very important because you get to learn history that you wouldn't normally learn in school. And just because schools like to kind of soften up stories because of reputation. And we learn at the camp the truth about certain events, and we learn a lot of different stuff about our culture, like ancient Mayan, Aztecs. I got to learn some of the Nahuatl language, and this past year in the summer, and I think it's important to educate yourself as a kid throughout your life, because knowledge is very important to me. And not sure what else. I don't know. Danny knows more.
Then let's do this. If you guys are ready, yeah, let's go ahead and open up for questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.